Okay, this is a wood duck 10. It has been built and received one skim coat in the class I did last week. You can see there's a few spots that could use a little bit of work. It's not super shiny yet. There's a few drips, like right here there's a drip from when I did the deck. Up here there's a little, that's probably a hair, and another hair up here, and a drip here. So what we want to do is sand that flat and give it another skim coat. Ready to sand. There's a little bit of a drip going on here and up in here, but most of this is just the texture of the fiberglass. Now we don't want to get rid of the texture of the fiberglass. Just take off high spots. There's a hair here, and that might be a bug or something. Stuff like that can come off, but we don't want to remove all the texture of the fiberglass. It'll reduce the strength, and it's not necessary. So this is my big old sander. I've got 120 grit sandpaper on it. You can see I've used it a little bit already. So I'm just going to go lightly over here and get it as smooth as I can. Okay, here, so this drip, I've knocked it down. It's not perfectly flat. I could still feel it a little bit. I could do a little more. And here I could still feel the texture. So that's done. I've taken the high spots off the texture. That, what I thought might have been a bug, is gone. I'll just hit this just a little more. That's good. I'm liking that. Okay, I've come by with 120 grit on my sander and sanded this drip. There's still a shiny place here. I could probably sand it more, but I think I'm going to skim coat it. And here you can see a place where there's a drip. I sanded it. I got the high spot off. There's still texture of the fiberglass in this area. And up here there's a place where there's a little too much epoxy. I just sort of sanded that flat. Okay, this is the cockpit combing. I have skim coated this with epoxy. Sometimes I'll fiberglass this, but I decided not to on this boat. I want to get this nice and smooth, and maybe I'll give it one more skim coat to protect it a little bit. So I'll give it a very light sand. Okay, so that's got the top surface smooth. I'm going to do the rest by hand. This is a piece of 120 grit sandpaper. I usually fold it in half and stick it together. It makes a nice pad to work with. A little more durable than just sandpaper by itself. And so I can sort of wrap this around the combing a little bit. You get this inside edge nice and smooth. We'll do it up here too. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to do between skim coats. I can even take and fold this and get underneath. This is a piece of my boat where the fiberglass had a little wrinkle in it. I think that might be from folding it in the box or something. This particular kit had sat around a little while before I built it. And so to skim coat that and make that go away, we've got to do a little sanding on that. That's, we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to sand the top of this a little bit. I'm not going to try to make it completely go away. We'll skim coat it again after I do this and see how we stand. So first I'll sand it here a little bit. Here's another view of that area. You can see the wrinkle coming up through here. I've sanded the top edges of that a little bit. You can see how it's sort of white, and beside it is the darker, unsanded surfaces. For now, that's okay. Before we're done, we want to make sure that that's all uniformly sanded. But okay, here's a place where I have a little decorative veneer. This is on top of the plywood and under the fiberglass. So you can see it's got a little thickness to it. And so sanding around it's going to be a little tricky. I'm going to be very careful around here that I don't actually sand into the veneer. Yeah, right here there was a place where it was sticking up a bit. I already sanded that a little bit. But it looks pretty good. There's actually an air bubble in here, which I can fill, and that too, I can fill that. I'm going to sand it first and have a look at it. I want to make it smooth enough so my skim coat will fill all the texture of the fiberglass and just make it smooth. So when I sand these drips, I'm angling the sander a little bit so that I use this edge. And rather than just holding it there, I'm sweeping it up and down a little bit so that it gets the whole area sanded. I don't want to spend too much time on any one spot because it's very easy to go through. Okay. Okay, I've gotten rid of most of the high spots. I've taken off most of the shine. There's still some dark areas that haven't been sanded in there, but I'm going to leave those. Maybe they'll fill next time. Maybe I'll have to sand them some more. And I think that's pretty good. This still, I could still feel this edge, so I could sand that a little more. Down in here's not too bad. There's a little bit here. Okay, I'm going to call that good. Right here is a little air bubble around the veneer and over the fiberglass. There's another one up here. To fill that, what I'm going to do is drill a little hole in it and then inject epoxy in to fill the void. And drill a little hole just through the fiberglass. There we go. And I'll do this one too. Okay, I've tried not to drill into the wood. Okay, I've filled a syringe with a little bit of clear epoxy, thoroughly mixed, and I'm going to inject it into that hole. Let's see what that does. It has started to fill the hole, the bubble. I may need to make a second drilled hole so that there's somewhere for the air to go. Oops, I'm going to wipe that up. The top one's pretty good. The bottom one looks like it hasn't filled completely. I'll use a knife and make a little puncture at the other end of the bubble. Let's see if the epoxy will now. There we go. And it comes squirting out that little hole, and that takes care of that. I can do the same here. Good. And I'm just going to leave that little extra epoxy sitting there for a little bit, and it'll soak in around the drilled hole, and hopefully it'll all disappear. Okay, this is the rear hatch on a wood duck 10, and I've glued it up, but you can see that the spacer and the deck opening don't quite align. What that means is the hatch won't fit down in real tight. So I need to clean out some of that wood. There's also a little drip of epoxy here I can just cut off with a chisel. And I can also use the chisel as a scraper. Okay, I've scraped this back a bit, and now the hatch should fit right in. Yep, and drops right down. So there's a little space across all the way around the top. This I gave a little sand for the skim coat. The rest of the boat's been sanded for the skim coat. And while we're at it, we can coat the inside of the hatch. So this is the hatch rim. It helps the gasket seal. It's designed to go right around the inside edge of the hatch lip, like so. There's a couple ways of attaching it. One way is to put a few drops of super glue on here and super glue it down, and then brush the whole thing with clear epoxy. The epoxy will wick underneath the rim and seal it. Another way is just to brush the whole thing with clear epoxy, brush the bottom edge of this with clear epoxy, and then use some clothespins to clamp it in place. I think I'll go with the super glue. As you can see, clothespins are perfect for clamping this rim in place. Okay, to super glue this in place, I'm going to put a few drops around the rim. This is super glue. It's got, this is a, they call gap filling super glue, which is a little thicker. It's about the consistency of, say, honey or something. This is the accelerator, and if I missed the opening with the accelerator, when I put the hatch in place, the super glue will harden very quickly, and it'll hold everything in place. But I got to put it down accurately because I don't have a lot of time to move things around. Okay, that's glued in place pretty well. Okay, I've mixed up some clear epoxy, old sour cream can, and I'm going to brush epoxy into the hatch area. I'm going to work hard to get it saturating underneath the cockpit combing, or the lip. I'm also going to coat underneath here because I didn't do that after installing it. So it would have been wise to put a piece of plastic inside here so I don't drip all over the inside. Now I'm going to brush some more epoxy just onto the deck here. We'll use that for the skim coat. I have a plastic squeegee here. The edge has been used a little bit. I'm going to dress it up with a block plane. Just one pass and then rub it on my pants. And that polishes it a little bit. And the squeegee I can push around this bit of epoxy, very much, and fill the weave of the fiberglass where I've sanded it lightly. Okay, I've brushed a little epoxy on here, and I'm going to use this squeegee with quite a bit of pressure to push the epoxy around right up to the end here, and then bring it back. And at the end, I'm going to turn the squeegee around and keep that puddle moving. And turn it around again. Pick up the edge along here, and I'll go one more time over this whole area. Again, rather than picking up the squeegee, I turn it around. Every time I pick it up, I leave a little mess that I got to deal with. This is a little neater. I'm just going to keep going. This section of the deck looks very nice. It's just about done. Still just a little bit of texture of the fiberglass cloth, but I think that'll sand right out. Here's a place where there's some drips on the surface. One of the best ways to get rid of those is with a hard sanding block. Here I've taken a piece of plywood and just stuck some of sandpaper with adhesive backing on it. Nice and hard and flat. This side I rounded a little bit. You can see I planed the corners off a little bit. That'll help get into some spots that are otherwise hard to reach. You can see some lines in there. That's because my squeegee had a nick in it, or a piece of dirt or something in the epoxy. I don't really like that. I'm going to give this another sand and one more skim coat. It'll make it a lot easier to get a real nice finish when it's all said and done. Plus the lines, the wrinkles in the fiberglass still show here a little bit. Basically pretty good. Because I've skim coated already, I can be a little more aggressive with the sanding. Because I won't go into the fiberglass because I've already filled the weave. So you can see I've sanded around the veneer. Looks pretty good. There's still a little bit around the edges. I might just touch that up with a little piece of sandpaper with my finger rather than using the power tool. You can see here I've probably gone through the fiberglass a little bit. I haven't really exposed the wood, but I want to make sure to skim coat that thoroughly with epoxy. Okay, this has all been sanded. You can see there's still a little shine left here and there, but I've taken off most of the high spots, and this is ready for probably one more skim coat, and then I'll be ready to varnish it. This is the same squeegee I used yesterday. Its edge is a little dirty. I had epoxy on it. What I did is I brushed an extra thick layer of epoxy on it, and then you can flex it and the epoxy chips off. I'm going to clean up the edge again with the block plane. I'm going to give it 2 passes this time so it's nice and smooth. And that feels pretty good. And I'm going to rub it on my shirt like I'm trying to cut myself. And that will sort of burnish the edge, make it even smoother. It's pretty important, because we don't want any long streaks or anything left behind as we plane. There's a little chip of epoxy on the edge here. I'm going to see if I can get rid of that. But it feels pretty good. I think that's good. Okay, I've mixed up some epoxy in my yogurt cup here. And I've actually let it sit for a few minutes so that the chemical reaction in the epoxy can start. But it's still nice and runny. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of epoxy on. I just poured it on. I'm going to use my squeegee to catch it before it drips and spread it around nice and thin. I'll try to get up under the cockpit here. And now I'm just going back and forth, working that epoxy onto the surface. Trying not to leave any drips. I'm going to catch this line. And it takes along the edge here, we sometimes end up with some drips. When you squeegee the epoxy around, sometimes you just push it off the edge. What I usually do is just rub it with my hand, polish the drips off, make it nice and smooth. Even if you don't see drips, it's worth running your hand around, and that way you'll catch anything even if you don't see it. Here I've sanded the bow of this wood duck, and I've removed basically all of the shine from it, so that's ready to varnish. I've sanded it with 120 grit sandpaper, and it looks pretty good. There's a few shiny places. It's probably hard to see in the camera. Right there's a little shiny place. I should probably sand that a little more.